Hello everyone. Thank you for always accompanying TL TIEN. Today, we will follow the whole scene and analyze the process of capturing Secretary Huong and her accomplices.
After Jack had all the evidence of Secretary Huong's crime, Jack immediately sent all the evidence to the police. Now the police are consolidating the case and issuing an urgent arrest warrant. It's time for Secretary Huong and all her accomplices to pay for the evil deeds they have done to Jack and TL TIEN. She was arrested and imprisoned once before for kidnapping TL TIEN. When she was released from prison, she should have repented and felt wrong for what she had done. But unexpectedly, she still harbored resentment towards Jack and TL TIEN, and once again caused serious consequences. Records and evidence complete, the arrest warrant for Secretary Huong and her accomplices. Officer Tung sat across from Mr. Dung, Jack's mother's longtime friend, in a small but cozy office. The atmosphere was calm, except for the soft hum of a fan running, creating a strangely relaxed feeling. Mr. Dung, although older and retired, still retained the sharpness of someone with years of experience in law enforcement. Tung, a young and passionate police officer, felt the tension as they prepared for the crucial operation ahead. "We have to be extremely careful with every move," Mr. Dung said, his gaze serious as he observed Tung's reactions. "You know, the villains are not the easy type to catch. They always find ways to hide, but if we play it right, we can make them reveal themselves." Tung nodded. He understood the gravity of the situation. Although he was a little anxious, this was their only chance to capture the criminals without putting anyone in danger. "And Jack, Mr. Dung, what do you think?" Tung asked, concerned about Jack's involvement in this plan. Mr. Dung furrowed his brows, still uneasy. "He's a target. I don't want him to get hurt. Jack's mother has told me about the schemes that Secretary Huong and her underlings are using to destroy him. If we're not careful, they could take over his company." Tung sighed and looked at Mr. Dung, his eyes full of resolve. "We can't let that happen. Jack is the only one who can draw Secretary Huong and her gang out. He's the key to getting them into the open. If we do this right, it will be over soon." Mr. Dung still wasn't entirely comfortable with the plan, but he nodded. "If Jack has agreed to participate, we need to make sure he's protected. Secretary Huong and her team don't just want to ruin him. They want to bankrupt the entire company. They've been watching every move Jack makes, and they're trying to bring him down." Just moments later, Jack walked into the room, his face serious but determined. He approached the table and sat down, looking at both men. "Hello, everyone," Jack said, his voice deep yet firm. "I've thought it through and I'm in. But before we start, I want to know exactly what my role in this plan is." Tung and Mr. Dung exchanged glances before Tung elaborated further. "We'll make them believe that Jack is in great danger. Secretary Huong and her underlings will think Jack is trying to escape them. We'll leave a few false trails to make them think Jack is hiding in an area where they can easily capture him," Tung explained. "The goal is to trick them into walking right into a trap. Jack will be the bait, but what they don't know is that we'll be watching them closely." Mr. Dung continued, his voice serious. "We'll set up a fake scenario to make them believe Jack is living in fear, being hunted by them. But in reality, everything they do is just pushing them into the trap we've set." Jack's concern was evident in his eyes, but he knew there was no turning back. "So, I'll act like someone who's being chased, right? How do I make sure they don't realize we're tracking them?" Tung looked at Jack, recognizing the resolve in his eyes. "Exactly. But the most important thing is for you to act naturally. They can't suspect a thing. They have to think they have the upper hand." Mr. Dung smiled, though worry still lingered in his expression. "Jack, you mustn't give any indication that this is a setup. It has to feel real, no mistakes." The next day, the plan officially began. Jack, with the support of Tung and Mr. Dung, started to create false leads that made Secretary Huong and her team believe Jack was on the run. Information was leaked. Fake phone calls were made, and online traces were left to make them think Jack was panicked and trying to escape. But things weren't as easy as they seemed. Secretary Huong, although intelligent, still couldn't detect that everything was part of a game orchestrated by the police and Jack's friends. They began to believe they were weakening Jack, that the company was on the brink of collapse, and that Jack was the one who would bring it down. With each step, Jack and Tung had to be even more careful, as Secretary Huong's gang was always lurking. Eventually, the underlings of Secretary Huong, who had been drawn into the plan unknowingly, acted on the false information that Jack and Tung had provided. When they showed up at a location Jack had set up, the police swooped in and arrested the gang members. Though they didn't catch Secretary Huong, capturing her underlings was still a major victory. They had been led to believe they were in control, but now they were behind bars, facing serious charges. Jack and Tung knew the battle wasn't over, but this was a big step toward unraveling Secretary Huong's scheme and protecting Jack's company. As soon as she lost contact with her henchmen, Huong panicked. She knew her plan was unraveling, and everything was about to collapse. Her men, assigned to monitor Jack and stir chaos within the company, had suddenly gone silent. Hours passed with no word, and Huong sensed imminent danger. Her instincts, honed from years of deceit, screamed that time was running out. She needed to flee immediately before it was too late. In a matter of minutes, Huong packed her belongings, preparing to leave the safe house she had been hiding in. Although the full picture wasn't clear yet, she couldn't risk waiting. Losing her men likely meant law enforcement was closing in. She summoned a private car and ordered the driver straight to the international airport. "Don't stop." Her eyes were filled with tension. She knew that if she didn't get out of the country now, arrest would be inevitable. Meanwhile, at the police headquarters, Officer Tung and Mr. Dung, Jack's mother's longtime friend, received confirmation that Huong's henchmen had been captured. Though Huong herself remained at large, dismantling her network was a major step forward. Still, neither of them let their guard down. They knew Huong wouldn't go quietly. She was far too cunning to be caught so easily. "We can't let Huong slip away," Tung said firmly to Mr. Dung. "She won't go down without a fight." Mr. Dung nodded and immediately called airport security. "Check every international flight. Huong may be trying to flee. No one leaves without being screened." The airport quickly went on high alert. Security personnel began thorough checks of all flights, baggage, and passengers. Specialized airport police teams were deployed at entrances, boarding gates, and departure lounges, especially watching for any suspicious behavior. At that very moment, Huong arrived at the airport, hurriedly making her way to the check-in area. She tried to stay calm, but anxiety gnawed at her. Every step felt watched, but she pushed forward. Missing this flight could mean losing everything. Airport security, tipped off in advance, had her name and profile. Officers combed to the passenger lists and watched the lines carefully, scanning for anyone resembling her description. Time was running out. Huong approached the security checkpoint. Despite her nerves, she maintained a composed exterior. Just then, a security officer stopped her. "We need to check your baggage," he said firmly, though not suspiciously. "Of course," Huong replied with a polite smile. But inside, her heart pounded like a war drum. Elsewhere in the airport, Officer Tung and Mr. Dung had just arrived. With intel from airport staff, they began moving toward the inspection zone. "We have to hurry," Tung muttered. "If she gets on that plane, she's gone." The pressure rose as security increased their screening of passengers and luggage. It felt as if everything was aligning for a final confrontation. Would Huong escape, or was her downfall finally near? Huong glanced nervously around, though no pursuers were in plain sight. She felt the presence of eyes watching her. Could this really be the end of the elaborate scheme she had crafted for so long? With every passing second, Huong sensed a tightening net around her. She needed to get on that plane before her cover was blown. After receiving information about Huong's appearance at the airport, Tang and Mr. Dung immediately went to the airport. Will they be able to catch Huong? Let's follow along.
As soon as they arrived at the airport, Tang and Mr. Dung immediately informed Jack and TL TIEN. Huong is currently hiding at the international terminal. The news hit Jack like a bolt of lightning. He gripped his phone tightly, his eyes fixed sternly on the security gate. Beside him, TL TIEN held his hand, feeling the tension in the air. Not far away, Huong was pulling a suitcase, hurrying past lines of passengers. She wore a face mask, a hat, and a long coat that concealed most of her appearance. Her every move showed urgency, and her eyes darted nervously, clearly afraid of being watched. Tang and the airport's internal security team, in cooperation with authorities, quickly split up to search each area. The surveillance footage was pulled up in real time, and a blurry image of Huong passing a convenience store near gate E7 was confirmed. Mr. Dung said gravely, "She's trying to board the next international flight. We must block every exit route." Jack stayed connected via earpiece with Tang. He stressed the importance of avoiding panic and acting strictly within the law, ensuring the safety and comfort of other passengers. Huong has access to sensitive internal documents. If she escapes the country, the consequences could be severe, Jack stated firmly. At the check-in counter, Huong lowered her head and spoke softly to the staff. Just as she received her boarding pass and turned to leave, a plainclothes security officer approached and stood nearby. Huong glanced sideways, momentarily startled, but tried to remain calm. Then came a clear and firm voice. "Excuse me, ma'am. We need to verify your identity." Huong froze. She looked around and saw several individuals in plain clothes closing in. She considered fleeing but found her path blocked. Realizing there was no way out, she slowly let go of her suitcase. Her eyes were red, yet she maintained an eerie calm. From the airport security office, TL TIEN watched the scene unfold on a monitor. Her heart sank. Though Huong had betrayed them, seeing her in this state stirred a strange mix of sorrow and regret. If only she hadn't chosen this path, TL TIEN whispered. Huong was escorted to a private room for questioning. There, she was formally informed of the accusations, leaking company information and aiding fraudulent activities. Mr. Dung presented documents with irrefutable evidence, email copies, audio recordings of Huong communicating with a network under surveillance. Huong stayed silent for a long while before finally looking up. "I won't deny it," she said. "But I was also a victim. I was threatened and manipulated by people you may not even know exist." Mr. Dung replied calmly, "We will investigate thoroughly. But your decision to run only complicates things. If you had cooperated earlier, the outcome might have been different." Huong said nothing more, only asking quietly to make a phone call to her family. Her weary demeanor struck Jack, who stood in the hallway outside. He felt a pang of regret. Once, Huong had been a trusted member of his team. Meanwhile, airport operations remained smooth. The security team had acted swiftly and discreetly, preventing public disruption and ensuring all actions complied with the law. Tung stepped out and nodded to Jack. "It's done. The investigation can begin now." Jack thanked him, his eyes still fixed on the lit room behind them. He knew a new chapter was about to start, not just for the company, but for everyone involved. On the way back, TL TIEN sat in silence, eyes moist with emotion. "I didn't think it would come to this," she said softly. Jack gently squeezed her hand. "She made her choices. All we can do is face the truth." The car remained quiet for the rest of the drive, each of them deep in thought. But they knew that today's ending marked a new beginning, a path toward justice, accountability, and protecting those they loved. At the district police headquarters, Huong was escorted into the interrogation room after completing the necessary procedures. The small room, lit by a bright white lamp directly above the table, created a cold and tense atmosphere. Sitting across from her were two investigators, serious but not aggressive, following legal protocol. Huong maintained a calm demeanor at first, avoiding direct eye contact. She knew what was coming. On the table was a thick file, evidence collected from internal emails, surveillance footage, and witness statements. One of the investigators opened the questioning. "Ms. Huong, we already have substantial evidence linking you to internal manipulation and causing damage to Mr. Jack's company. But what we want today is to hear the truth from you. Why did you do it?" Huong remained silent for a few seconds. Then suddenly she bowed her head low, her voice hoarse. "I was wrong. I admit everything." She took a deep breath as if gathering all her courage to continue. "I didn't just betray the company. I made a terrible mistake involving TL TIEN." At that moment, the investigator signaled for the official recording of the confession to begin. Huong slowly recounted the events. She admitted to planning everything months in advance after being lured by an external group promising power and money. Her mission was to destroy Jack at all costs, leaking confidential documents and using psychological tricks to destabilize him. But what shocked everyone most was the next confession. The man who claimed to be TL TIEN's biological father. "I hired him. He's an actor. I paid him to pretend to be her family, to get close to her and confuse her, to drive a wedge between her and Jack." Both investigators exchanged glances, clearly surprised. One of them asked, "Do you have proof of this?" Huong nodded. "I have a recording of our conversation, his fee, and what he was instructed to do. It's all in my phone, which has already been confiscated." This testimony was officially recorded and filed. After the interrogation, TL TIEN was invited to the station, not as a victim, but to personally hear what Huong had to say in her attempt at redemption. In the quiet waiting room, TL TIEN walked in. She sat across from Huong, her eyes a mix of anger and disbelief. Huong, no longer the sharp, confident assistant she once was, now sat silently, her hands clenched tightly. "Do you have something to say to me?" Tu Tien asked, her voice calm but trembling slightly. Huong looked up, her eyes carrying a rare honesty after all the lies. "I'm sorry, Tien. I hired a man to pretend to be your father. I wanted you to lose focus, to question your past. I know what I did was cruel." Tu Tien froze. Memories of thinking she had reunited with a long-lost parent, the overwhelming joy, followed by sleepless nights of doubt, all came crashing down. She didn't cry, but her eyes turned red and her lips pressed tight. "Why would you do that?" she asked, barely above a whisper. Huong lowered her eyes and replied softly, "Because I was jealous. I had feelings for Jack, and I couldn't accept that he chose you. But in the end, I lost everything. You didn't deserve any of this." Tu Tien closed her eyes and took a deep breath to remain composed. She stood up without saying much, leaving only one sentence behind. "I forgive you, but I'll never forget." After the meeting, Tu Tien sat quietly outside the police station, staring into the distance. Jack arrived and gently sat beside her, saying nothing. He simply held her hand tightly. Tu Tien leaned on his shoulder and whispered, "I trusted the wrong person, but I've learned to see people more clearly now." Jack wrapped his arm around her and replied softly, "From now on, no one will ever hurt you again. I'm here." Though the truth brought pain to Tu Tien's heart, it also closed a chapter filled with deception. It opened the path for a new beginning, one where she could move forward, stronger and no longer trapped by the past. The pursuit of Tu Tien's imposter father. After selling all of the pigs that Tu Tien had lovingly raised, the man who had pretended to be her father began to feel a deep sense of guilt. At night, lying in his small shack on the mountainside, he couldn't sleep. Memories haunted him, the innocence in Tu Tien's eyes, the gentle smile of Jack's mother who had welcomed him like real family. Though he hadn't harmed anyone, the prolonged deception weighed heavily on his conscience. One rainy afternoon, he made a decision. He carefully gathered all the money from selling the pigs and quietly brought it to Jack's mother. Jack's mother, kind-hearted and forgiving, did not scold him. Looking into his eyes, she seemed to understand the pain and regret he carried. She simply said, "If you truly feel remorse, live honestly. Everyone makes mistakes, but it's never too late to stop." After that, he left without a word, returning to the deep forest where he had once hidden from the world. There, he built a humble hut out of bamboo and leaves, choosing to live in solitude. He cut off contact with everyone, keeping only a small radio to listen to the news and quietly follow Tu Tien's journey from afar. However, the police had reopened the case involving identity fraud and emotional manipulation for personal gain. Although he had not directly harmed Jack or Tu Tien, he had played a part in a larger scheme. Selling the pigs was considered misappropriation of assets through deception, even if he had voluntarily returned the money. To serve the investigation, the authorities still needed to bring him in for questioning. An informant tipped off the police that he was hiding in a northern forest. A team of 3 officers was dispatched with a photo and detailed information. The search lasted 3 days and 2 nights. The forest was treacherous, with scattered trails. Locals helped guide the officers as they tracked signs of his presence. On the 3rd day, they found warm ashes near a large tree, clear evidence of someone recently cooking. Following the trail, they discovered a camouflaged hut hidden among the foliage. As they approached, the man did not run. Instead, he stepped out with his hands raised, his eyes calm and sorrowful. "I knew this day would come," he said quietly. "I didn't plan to hide forever." At the police station, he fully cooperated and confessed everything. He admitted being recruited by a group of strangers to pose as Tu Tien's father in order to gain her trust and access her property, but insisted he had no part in any physical harm. "I just needed shelter, and they promised me safety," he explained. "At first, it was just a lie. But over time, I couldn't bear to hurt that poor girl." Investigators cross-checked his statement with earlier evidence. Indeed, he had not been present in any incidents where Jack or Tu Tien were in danger. On the contrary, some witnesses testified that he had helped Tu Tien secretly, once carrying her back to his hut and treating her with herbal remedies after she collapsed in the woods. These actions were considered mitigating factors. When Tu Tien learned of his arrest, she wasn't angry. Instead, she sat in silence for a long time and sighed. "I don't need a perfect father," she told Jack. "Just someone who once cared for me, even a little, is enough." The case file was forwarded to the prosecutor's office. After reviewing all circumstances, his voluntary return of the money, cooperation with authorities, lack of criminal behavior, no repeat offenses, and the victim's forgiveness, the authorities decided not to prosecute criminally. Instead, he was issued an administrative penalty and placed under observation for a period of time. Still, he chose not to return to the city. He went back to the forest, not to hide, but to truly redeem himself. He grew vegetables, raised chickens, and lived self-sufficiently. Occasionally, He sent letters to Jack's mother, thanking her for the compassion that had helped him turn his life around. This story ends not with a prison sentence, but with the awakening of a man who had once lost his way. Though not her real father, he left a mark on Tu Tien's memory, a shadowy figure who, despite his mistakes, had tried to do the right thing in the end. A night journey and a shocking scene. 2 days after learning that Tu Tien's fake father would not be prosecuted and had retreated to live in seclusion in the forest, Tu Tien remained deeply unsettled. She sat silently on the front steps of the house, her eyes gazing into the hazy sky. Jack came out, handed her a cup of warm tea, and sat beside her. She whispered, "I want to visit him." Jack nodded without needing to ask further. "Let's go." Tonight. Around 11 p.m., they set off by motorbike. The winding road into the forest was pitch black, filled only with the sounds of insects and the whisper of wind through the trees. Jack drove while Tu Tien held on to him gently from behind, her heart filled with a mix of emotions. She didn't know exactly why she wanted to go, to forgive, to ask a question she never got to ask, or simply to see him one last time. They rode for more than 2 hours, then turned onto a narrow dirt path, rocky and uneven. The motorbike's headlight cut through the mist that floated low beneath the tree canopy. The air grew colder. Jack pulled over at an abandoned roadside shack for a brief rest. Tu Tien sipped some water, quietly lost in thought. "Are you scared?" Jack asked. "No. Just a little worried about how I'll face him." By about 3 a.m., they reached the area where the fake father was known to be living. Leaving the bike at a nearby villager's house, they continued on foot along a small trail once used by police. The forest wind whispered through the high branches, and the damp earth felt cold beneath their feet. The silence was so complete they could hear each other's steps and breathing. As they walked deeper into the forest, the surroundings became more desolate and quiet. A chilly breeze passed through, making Tu Tien shiver, but Jack held her hand tightly, lending her strength. Though it was still dark, they began to see a faint glimmer of light ahead. Through the thick leaves, a small wooden hut came into view, its roof patched with palm leaves. A soft glow shone from a makeshift lantern fashioned out of a glass bottle. Tu Tien and Jack hid behind a large tree, observing silently. The area was still, save for the sound of a nearby stream and the occasional distant hoot of an owl. Jack leaned in and whispered, "We're here. Are you ready?" Tu Tien nodded slightly, eyes steady. They stepped out from the cover and slowly made their way toward the hut. Each step felt heavier than the last. Suddenly, when they were just a few steps away, their eyes locked on something ahead and both came to a halt. Right in front of them, an utterly unexpected